I always thought a wedding day was supposed to be something magical, filled with joy, excitement, and the anticipation of a new life. But on the day Ben got married, I realized for the first time that it could be very different. The runaway groom. I stood in the hallway, watching Ben nervously adjust his tie in front of the mirror. His new suit fit perfectly, but he looked like he wanted to run as far away from here as possible. I walked closer, trying to smile, though inside I was filled with anxiety. "Ben, why do you look so gloomy?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Or did you change your mind about getting married? Look, if Mary sees you like this, she'll definitely think you're about to run away." I tried to tease him, but he didn't even smile. I'd known him longer than he'd known Mary. I was the one who introduced them, and today I was supposed to be proud of that. But for some reason I couldn't feel happy looking at his empty gaze. "As if anyone cares what I think," he sighed, not taking his eyes off the mirror. "Come on, man. Don't be so down. This is your day. You're getting married. That's awesome, but you look like you're at a funeral. Smile." He forced something like a smile, but his eyes stayed sad. Suddenly I realized he really didn't want to get married. But why? I'd just come back from Seattle a week ago, especially for their wedding. We'd barely seen each other. I was busy with family, and whenever we did meet, Mary would talk nonstop, never letting me have a real conversation with Ben. Now I could see clearly. Things weren't as perfect between them as they seemed. "Okay, Ben, we've got half an hour left. Come on, spill it, what's going on?" He sat heavily on a chair, head down. "What's the point? Nothing can be fixed now. Today we're getting married, and I'll have to drag this out for years, maybe the rest of my life." I stared at him, not believing my ears. A year ago he was crazy about Mary. What changed? Is it about her pregnancy? "You always said you wanted kids, didn't you?" "I did," he shrugged. "But I'm not sure she'll be a good mother. All she cares about is shopping and parties. I was always careful. I have no idea how she got pregnant." I froze. There was not just exhaustion in his voice, but a kind of hopelessness. "Wait, if it weren't for the baby, you wouldn't have proposed?" I asked carefully. He looked even more miserable. "I didn't propose. Mary just showed up 2 weeks ago, handed me a doctor's note saying she was pregnant, and said we were getting married. I didn't even have time to think. I feel like I'm in a silent movie where no one hears me, and everyone else is just happy." I sat down next to him and put my hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry to hear that. But you've been together for 2 years. You had to know something like this could happen." "That's just it, it couldn't." He looked at me with despair. "I was always careful. Honestly, I'm not even sure it's my child, or if she's even pregnant at all. And if she's not, then what's the point of all this?" I'd never seen him so lost. Ben was always a man of his word, not the type to abandon a girl in trouble. But now he was tormented by doubts, and I didn't know how to help him. I looked at Ben and tried to remember when he'd become so distant. I remembered how a year ago he glowed with happiness talking about Mary, making plans, dreaming of a family. All of that seemed to have vanished, dissolved in anxiety and fatigue. "Ben, are you really marrying her just because of the baby?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He gave a bitter smile. "Do I have a choice? If she's having a baby, I can't do otherwise. I never forgive myself, you know me. Marriage is the only right thing to do." I thought about it. There was no joy in his words, only duty and fear. Suddenly I felt scared for him. For both of them. But you can be a father without a marriage certificate, I said gently. If you're not sure you want this marriage, maybe you shouldn't go through with it? He looked at me with sadness. I don't know, Bethany. Everything happened so fast. I didn't even have time to understand what was going on. And now it's too late. I sighed. Time was running out, and I knew Mary was waiting for me. I'd promised to help her with her dress, but I was still sitting next to Ben, unable to leave. All right, I have to go. Mary's probably waiting. Hang in there, Ben. Everything will be okay, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. I left the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts. I paused in the hallway for a second, listening to his heavy breathing. I wanted to go back, hug him, tell him everything could change. But I knew he wouldn't listen. The walk to Mary's room took a minute. I walked quickly, trying not to think about what I'd just heard. When I entered the bride's room, I was greeted by the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something sharp and unpleasant. Mary stood by the window and Paige, her friend, was fussing with the dress. Were you smoking? I asked, unable to hide my irritation. I'm just so nervous. Just one, Mary replied guiltily, and Paige behind her gave a sly chuckle. But you're pregnant, I protested. It's still early, nothing bad will happen. Mary waved me off and took a sip of champagne. I felt a knot tighten inside me. Something was wrong. I helped lace up the dress, trying not to look at Mary. She looked beautiful, but there wasn't a trace of happiness in her eyes. Oh, Mary, stop it already, Paige suddenly said, giving me a mischievous look. Bethany's going to find out soon anyway. There's no baby. I froze. What do you mean? I asked, not believing my ears. That's right. Paige smiled triumphantly. My aunt wrote the doctor's note to make Ben come to his senses. He started pulling away, things got cold between them. Mary started freaking out, so I suggested it. Paige, why would you do that? Mary asked, hurt. Oh, come on. You don't really think Bethany's going to run to Ben and tell him everything, do you? It's the wedding day. No one would do that. I looked at both of them, unable to believe this was really happening. I knew Ben didn't want this wedding. I knew he was only doing it because of the baby. And now I knew there was no baby. I left the room, pretending I needed the bathroom, but really just to catch my breath. Locking myself in the small restroom, I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Ben. Mary isn't pregnant. That's 100%. The rest is up to you. His reply came almost instantly. Thank you. I knew that when we left the building, Ben wouldn't be there. I knew he couldn't go through with the wedding now that he knew the truth. And I couldn't blame him for that. I stood in the cramped bathroom, leaning against the cold tile, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding as if I were the one about to run away from the altar. Thoughts raced through my mind. Did I do the right thing? Did I betray Mary? But how could I stay silent, knowing Ben was about to take a step off a cliff? I left the bathroom, avoiding eye contact with Mary and Paige. They were busy with the dress, arguing about the veil, and didn't seem to notice I'd been gone. I absent-mindedly helped Mary fasten her bracelet, fixed a lock of her hair, but inside I already knew. Everything had changed. Bethany, why do you look so pale? Mary asked, looking at me in the mirror. I'm fine, just nervous for you, I lied. At that moment I felt like a traitor, but I knew. If I'd stayed silent, I'd have betrayed Ben and myself. We went down the stairs, Mary holding my arm, Paige following behind, chatting about something. Outside, the limo was waiting, and next to it, Owen, the best man. I immediately noticed Ben was missing. "Where's Ben?" Mary asked, trying to hide her anxiety. "I don't know," Owen shrugged. "I thought he went to see you." "He went to see me?" Mary repeated, panic in her voice. "Are you serious? But where?" Paige tugged her by the shoulder and whispered something in her ear. I saw Mary's face change. First surprise, then anger. She spun around, searching for me with her eyes, but I'd already slipped away into the crowd of guests. "Where's Bethany?" Mary shouted, but I didn't answer. I couldn't look her in the eye. Owen looked at her in confusion. "What happened?" he asked. "Well, looks like there won't be a wedding," Paige said with a crooked smile. "The groom bailed." A wave of commotion swept through the crowd. Guests exchanged glances, some pulled out their phones, others whispered. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to get as far away from this farce as possible. I walked out to the waterfront, where Ben and I used to stroll as kids. A few minutes later, he appeared beside me, still in his wedding suit, but without the tie, his hair tousled, and a look of relief on his face. "Well, that was close," he exhaled, sitting down next to me on the bench. I smiled through my exhaustion. "I never thought Mary was capable of something like that," I said. "But honestly, I'm glad you didn't sacrifice yourself." "Thank you for not staying silent," Ben said quietly. "As soon as I got your message, I knew I couldn't go through with it. My parents are going to be shocked, though." "They won't be," I assured him. "Just call them first, so they don't hear it from someone else." He nodded, pulled out his phone, and dialed. I stepped aside to give him some privacy. In that moment, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. I'd done the right thing. I'd saved my friend. When Ben finished his call, he came over to me. "You knew I'd come here, didn't you?" he asked. "Of course," I smiled. "You always come here when you need to think. And you always find me," he replied. And there was so much gratitude in his voice that I almost teared up. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know," he shrugged. "Maybe I'll go visit my brother for a while, clear my head." "What about you?" "I have a flight to Seattle tonight. Joshua's waiting. I already booked my ticket." "Tell him I said hi," Ben smiled. "He'll be surprised there was no wedding." "I'll tell him he didn't miss anything," I winked. We sat a little longer, chatting about nothing, reminiscing about childhood, dreaming about the future. I knew tomorrow would be a new day, and it would definitely be better than today. When Ben and I parted ways at the waterfront, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to pretend for anyone or justify myself. I walked along familiar streets, catching the glances of passers-by, and thought about how quickly illusions can crumble. Fragments of conversations, guests' faces, Mary's bewildered look, Paige's sharp whisper, all swirled in my mind. I knew people would talk about me, judge me, maybe even blame me. But I didn't care. I did what I believed was right. That evening I packed my suitcase. My mom walked around the apartment, peeking into my room now and then. "Bethany, are you sure you want to leave tonight? Maybe stay a few more days?" she asked, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Mom, I need to get back. Joshua's waiting and work won't wait either," I replied, carefully folding my things. "I heard what happened at the wedding," she began cautiously. I sighed. Of course, the rumors had already spread. "Mom, I couldn't let Ben make a mistake," I said quietly. She nodded and took my hand. "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." I smiled. At the airport, I ran into Paige. She was at the check-in counter, phone in hand, and when she saw me, she came over. "Bethany," she said, "you know Mary hates you now, right?" "Let her," I replied calmly. "Better she hates me than spends her life with someone who doesn't love her." Paige looked at me in surprise, then suddenly smiled. "You're brave, Bethany. I could never do what you did. Sometimes you just have to do what no one else will." I shrugged. We said goodbye and I headed to my gate. On the train to Seattle, I stared out the window for a long time, remembering childhood, school years, my walks with Ben, first crushes, fights, and reconciliations. I thought about how often we live someone else's life, trying to meet others' expectations, afraid to disappoint, afraid to be ourselves. I remembered how I used to dream of great love, true friendship, of being needed and loved. And suddenly I realized I already had all that, just not always in the form I'd imagined. In Seattle, Joshua met me at the station. He stood on the platform, smiling his wide, slightly awkward smile, and I suddenly realized how much I'd missed him. "So the bride ran away?" he teased, hugging me. "The groom ran away," I laughed. "And he did the right thing." "I knew you wouldn't let your friend down," Joshua said, taking my suitcase. "What would you have done?" I asked, looking into his eyes. "I'd want a friend like you by my side," he answered seriously. Seattle greeted me with its familiar coolness and damp air. I'd always loved this city for its honesty. Here, no one pretends it's sunny when it's really gray inside. Joshua led me through familiar streets, and I felt my anxiety slowly fade, replaced by calm. At home, he made tea, brought out my favorite pastries, and sat across from me, watching me closely. "So tell me," he said, "how did it really go?" I told him everything, no sugarcoating, no excuses. About Ben's struggle, Mary's schemes, how I couldn't stay silent. Joshua listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning. "You did the right thing," he finally said. "But now I guess everyone's talking about you?" "Let them talk," I sighed. "I don't regret it. If I had to choose again, I'd do the same." Joshua smiled. "That's why I love you. You always go all the way, even if the whole world is against you." I felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being judged, wasn't afraid to be myself. The next day I went back to work. My colleagues greeted me with curiosity. News of the canceled wedding had already reached the office. Some nodded sympathetically, others whispered behind my back, but I kept my composure. During my lunch break, Ben called. "Hey, Bethany. I just wanted to say, thank you again. If it weren't for you, I'd be the unhappiest man alive right now." "Have you decided what you're going to do next?" I asked. "Not yet," he admitted. "I think I'll go traveling for a while. I need to figure myself out, understand what I really want." "That's a good idea," I encouraged him. "Take your time. Everything will work out." "How about you?" he asked. "I'm home with Joshua. Everything's going to be fine, Ben." "I'm happy for you," he said quietly. "You deserve to be happy." We said our goodbyes. That evening, I met up with Paige at a cafe where we used to hang out. She immediately started apologizing. "Bethany, I'm sorry for everything. I had no idea it would turn out like this. I just wanted to help Mary, but I only made things worse." "It's okay, Paige," I smiled. "The important thing is that now everyone knows the truth. Let everyone draw their own conclusions." We talked for a long time, reminiscing about school days, laughing at old stories. I realized I didn't hold a grudge against anyone. Everything that happened was necessary for each of us to become more honest with ourselves. Few weeks passed. One evening, Joshua came up to me, put his arm around my shoulders and quietly asked, "Bethany, do you ever regret leaving your hometown?" I thought for a moment. "Sometimes," I answered honestly. "There are memories, friends, childhood left behind. But if I hadn't left, I wouldn't have met you. And maybe I wouldn't have learned to be honest with myself." Joshua smiled and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you're here. You're my person." Soon after, I got a message from Mary. It was short. "Bethany, I'd like to talk. Can we meet?" It took me a while to decide, but I finally agreed. We met in a small cafe on the edge of the city. Mary looked tired, but there was no anger in her eyes, just exhaustion and a new grown-up sadness. "I didn't come to fight," she said first. "I just wanted to say maybe thank you. You saved me from myself." I don't know what came over me. I thought if I lost Ben, everything would fall apart. But now I understand. You can't build happiness on a lie. I nodded, feeling relieved. "You're strong, Mary. You'll get through this. Just be honest with yourself," I said. We talked a little more, and I realized that each of us had learned something from this story. That evening, I told Joshua about the meeting. "Aren't you afraid you'll help someone again and end up suffering for it?" he asked with a smile. "No," I replied. "I'm not afraid to be myself anymore, even if someone doesn't like it." Joshua hugged me, and I felt that with him I could truly be myself. Few months went by. Ben sent a postcard from Europe. He was traveling, searching for himself, and wrote that for the first time in a long while he felt free. Paige found a new job. Mary enrolled in design courses, and I threw myself into creativity and work. One evening, I got a call from Owen, the same best man who had witnessed the wedding chaos. "Hey, Bethany." His voice was cheerful, but I could sense a hint of nervousness. "You won't believe it, but your friend Paige just showed up here. She wants to organize a get-together for all the old friends. How about a weekend reunion?" I smiled. It felt strange but nice, like life was giving us a chance to put a period at the end of an old story. "Of course, Owen, I'm in. Let everyone come," I replied. That weekend, we gathered at a cozy bar in Georgetown. Around the table were Owen, Paige, and even Mary showed up. A bit wary, but without her old bravado. To my surprise, Ben arrived soon after. He looked refreshed, with a bit of stubble and a new outlook on life. "So, Bethany," he said when we were alone at the bar, "you were right. Sometimes you have to tear everything down to build something real. The most important thing is not to be afraid of honesty," I replied, "even if it hurts." The evening was full of memories, jokes, and even a few gentle jabs at each other. Paige talked about her new job. Mary shared her plans to study abroad. And Owen admitted he'd always dreamed of starting his own business but never had the courage. "What about you, Bethany?" Mary asked. "What do you want?" I thought for a moment. I want to live honestly, not to be afraid of change, and to have real people by my side. A couple of weeks later, I got a letter from Mary. She wrote that she was leaving to study in Italy, thanked me for my honesty, and asked me not to lose touch. I smiled as I reread her words and realized, sometimes to let go of the past, you just have to allow it to leave. Life went on. I worked, learned, made plans. Another year passed almost unnoticed. Joshua and I celebrated our anniversary, invited friends, and had a small party. Ben sent a photo from the mountains. Mary sent a postcard from Venice, and Paige brought a huge cake. I looked at everyone and thought, this is real happiness. It's not in perfect pictures or other people's expectations, but in simple moments, in honesty, in the ability to forgive and move forward. Autumn in Washington had always felt like a time of change for me. One chilly evening, I was walking home from work when I suddenly heard a familiar voice. On the corner by a coffee shop stood Ben, with a backpack slung over his shoulder, a warm scarf, and a tired but genuinely happy smile. "Bethany," he waved. "I just got off the train. Decided to stop by DC for a couple of days to see how you're doing." We went into the coffee shop and ordered hot chocolate. Ben told me about his travels, the people he'd met, and how he'd learned to be alone and not fear solitude. "You know," he said, "I thought after everything that happened it would be hard to trust people again. But it turns out the most important thing is to forgive yourself. Then it's easier to forgive others, too." I listened and realized we'd both grown, changed, but remained close. "Are you happy, Bethany?" he asked suddenly. I smiled. "Yes, I'm happy. And I'm grateful to you for everything that happened." We hugged goodbye, and I felt that the past had finally let me go. One evening, when Joshua came home earlier than usual, he approached me with a mysterious smile. "I have a surprise for you," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside were train tickets to my hometown. "I thought you might want to visit your mom, see your friends," he explained. "And I'll come with you if you don't mind." I laughed and hugged him. We hadn't been back together in a long time, and suddenly I felt so warm inside. My hometown seemed smaller than I remembered. Mom greeted us with pies and hugs, and that evening old friends gathered around the table. Owen was there, Paige, and even Mary, home from Italy for the holidays. "I never thought we'd all be together again," Mary said, raising her glass. "And that we'd laugh about things that once felt like the end of the world." We reminisced, shared news, laughed, and even felt a little nostalgic. I looked at everyone and realized we'd grown up but stayed close. Each of us had found our own path, but something important still connected us. The next day, I walked the familiar streets. The snow crunched under my boots, the air was fresh and clear. I stopped by the old coffee shop where Ben and I used to dream about the future. At the next table sat a young couple, arguing, laughing, holding hands. I smiled, remembering myself at their age. Just then Ben called. He was in another city, but his voice was as familiar as ever. "Bethany, I just wanted to say I'm happy for you. Happy that you're doing well." "Thank you, Ben. I'm happy for you too." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. That evening, Joshua and I headed home. On the train, I watched the lights flash by and thought about how much had changed in the past year. I was no longer afraid of change, no longer clung to the past, no longer regretted what was gone. I knew there would be more challenges, joys, meetings, and goodbyes ahead. But now I was ready for anything, because I had love, friends, family, and most importantly, confidence in myself. This story isn't just about a wedding that never happened. It's about how easy it is to fall into the trap of other people's expectations, manipulation, and deceit. Sometimes people do desperate things to keep someone who no longer loves them, and for that, they're even willing to lie about the most important things. But lies, even if they seem like a way out, always destroy trust and lives. This story shows how important it is to stop and tell the truth, even when it hurts. Bethany found herself in a difficult situation. On one side, her friendship with Mary. On the other, her loyalty to Ben, who was ready to tie his life to someone who had deceived him in the worst way. Her honesty saved her friend from an unhappy marriage and gave everyone a chance to start over. This story is a reminder that you can't build relationships on lies and manipulation. Taking responsibility for your life and your choices is maturity. And true friendship isn't about playing along with someone's illusions, but about supporting them in a tough moment and not letting them make an irreversible mistake. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't be afraid to be honest with yourself and with others. Sometimes the truth hurts, but only it can give you freedom and a chance at real happiness. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment about what you think of Bethany's actions and what you would have done in her place, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new real-life stories.